right, the list of things that I still have yet to do for the E36 M3 to have it ready for its very first track day is getting smaller and smaller with each one of these episodes. We still do have some big stuff to address, but we're going to save that for another episode. Instead, what we got going on today is still a step in the right direction. We're kind of hitting the trifecta when it comes to installing parts on cars, you can say. Today we're going to be addressing some maintenance. We're also going to be installing some performance mods, and we're going to be installing some cosmetic mods all in today's episode. So it should be a fun one. Let's dive into the engine bay so I can show you guys what we got going on in today's episode. Here we go. In today's episode, we're back under the hood of the E36 M3 to continue with the ongoing track prep. However, unlike last episode, we won't be cutting anything apart to install any of the parts that are going into the car today. Instead, we're shifting our focus onto some much needed maintenance as well as some additional performance gains in the form of new NGK spark plugs paired with a brand new set of Dinan ignition coils. Now, I decided on purchasing these Dinan ignition coils for a couple of different reasons. First, and unquestionably the most important reason, is because I have no idea when the last time these ignition coils were ever replaced. I bought this car about a year and a half ago with just over 200,000 miles on it, which means there was over 2 decades and a couple 100,000 miles worth of time I personally wasn't looking after this car. So it's probably a safe bet to assume any and all parts on the car that I have yet to replace are in need of replacement, and sooner than later, I'd say. So, not to say that I absolutely needed new ignition coils, as the ones on the car now seem to be running just fine, but the last place I want to find out that I did need some is when I'm 4 hours away from home driving on track. So, out with the old and in with the new. In this way, I also have some old spares if I ever need them in a pinch. Now, the second reason I opted for these ignition coils, other than the fact that I personally think they look a lot better than the OEM ones, is Dinan's claim that they output about 10% more energy than the OEM ones, which according to Dinan, ensures a stronger and more consistent spark. Now, truthfully, between you and I, are these necessary in any regard? Probably not. Does the claimed additional energy output over OEM mean anything for my build at this time? Again, probably not. Now, I can see the desire for higher output ignition coils in a forced induction build, but in my case, they probably aren't going to give me much of anything noticeable in regards to performance gain. But Dinan does ensure that these coils output more energy and provide a more consistent spark, which to me does sound like a better bet as far as reliability goes. The ability to ensure proper ignition at all times means less problems in the future when I'm pushing this car to its limits. So it seems like a solid bet. Now, pair all of that with the fact that when I bought these during all of the online Black Friday sales, I paid just $160 for the entire set of 6 Dinan ignition coils, which for reference is about $100 less than the Bosch equivalent set and about $580 less than the OEM BMW ignition coil set for this car. So I'd say it's a worthwhile upgrade for the money spent. But of course, only time will tell if these stand up to the demands I have planned for them, and if they don't, thankfully, I have some old spares I can throw back into the car. Now, before we can get the Dinan ignition coils installed and before we swap the spark plugs, on the topic of addressing maintenance, I'm also going to be replacing the valve cover gasket. Now, to be completely upfront, I'm not 100% sure if mine was even leaking or not, but considering that the ignition coils were coming out anyways, and other than those, only a small handful of remaining bolts were stopping me from removing the valve cover, it seemed like a no-brainer to just have it replaced and documented so I know it's been addressed and officially checked off the list of things to do on the car. And once I finally did get the valve cover removed, I'm happy to report that it was a worthwhile venture for more than one reason. Other than replacing the gasket, I also got a peek at the top end of the engine internals, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised with what I was seeing. For an engine that has over 200,000 miles and with a not so great maintenance history, the inside of the cylinder head actually looks really good. No overbearing varnish buildup, no parts that look like they need immediate attention, and most certainly nothing that makes me feel like this car won't continue to take the abuse and then some once it's finally out on track. Nothing short of needing a fresh oil change, but overall, I'm very pleased with the initial peek inside of my M3's engine. Now, before I toss the valve cover back on, I do want to at least attempt to clean it up a bit. Other than some light oil seepage around the oil cap area and some dust buildup, the valve cover didn't need much, but that didn't stop me from trying to get it as clean as I can with a shop towel and a bit of elbow grease. And speaking of cleaning things up, similar to some of the hardware I cleaned up on my KW coilovers, I decided there was no better time to clean up the valve cover hardware than now. So after about 15 minutes of cleanup with a drill and some Scotch-Brite pads, I was able to get the valve cover hardware looking much better than they did when they came out of the car originally. And now that everything was cleaned up a bit and is looking fresh, before I closed the engine up for good, it was time to replace the spark plugs. Thankfully, not too much more work to pop each of the 6 spark plugs out of the car, and similar to the inside of the engine, there was nothing particularly worth noting in regards to these old spark plugs. They all looked similar once they were out of the car, which at the very least is a sign that nothing is specifically wrong in any of the cylinders. And so, without dragging you all along and individually showing you each of the 6 old spark plugs, let's just get the new ones installed so we can finally get the valve covers reinstalled and then see what the Dinan ignition coils look like all bolted down and installed once and for all. So the valve cover gasket is replaced, the spark plugs are replaced, and the Dinan ignition coils are officially installed on the E36 M3. But if you guys remember back to the beginning of the video, I did say we were kind of hitting the trifecta when it comes to installing parts on cars. I said that we were going to be doing some maintenance in today's video. I also said we were going to be installing some performance mods as well as some cosmetic mods, and the Dinan ignition coils definitely check off 2 of those things, but that actually wasn't everything I had planned to do in today's episode. There's actually one other thing that I want to install that checks off 2 of those boxes as well. So let's get back to the E36 M3 so I can show you guys what that is and what we are installing. Here we go. Now, when it comes to building a track car, I'll be the first to say that I'm completely out of my element. I'm not sure what it's going to take to make my E36 M3 track capable. In fact, I'm not even really sure myself what I'm trying to go out and accomplish. But there's no denying that I'm trying my best to get out there and see what that aspect of car culture is all about. And as you've seen so far, the best I could do at this moment without actually being on track is prepping the car for when it's out there. And one thing I've learned when researching what it takes to make a car more capable and enjoyable for that type of driving is the importance of rigidity. And more specifically, chassis rigidity. Now, I'm no expert, and so I can't speak on what the best way to go about tightening up the chassis would be. I'd assume somewhere along the lines of a roll cage, but until that time comes for me, I'll have to tighten up the M3 in other ways. And so, similar to the rear shock tower reinforcement bar I have in the trunk, today I'm going to also be installing this ECS tuning front strut brace to ultimately attempt to tighten the chassis, of course, but also to make the engine bay a little more appealing to look at. And last but not least, as a small little bonus mod, if you could really call it that, on the topic of Dinan parts, I've needed to install this carb sticker for the Dinan intake I've had since purchasing the M3 originally. It's been on the to-do list, and with smog around the corner this year, it seemed like the perfect addition to the engine bay to complement not only the intake, but the Dinan ignition coils as well. All right, so this is kind of the first test drive after installing the Dinan ignition coils, the new plugs of course, and the ECS tuning strut brace. Nothing super spectacular this drive, just kind of wanted to get the car out and see if maybe I feel anything different. Truthfully, between you and I don't, not only do I not drive this car really enough to feel like I'm going to be able to tell a difference, but also I am just not that experienced in general with, you know, doing these kinds of mods. And so I don't really know if the car's going to feel any different to me. Maybe someone more experienced than me would be able to tell, you know, without having the front strut brace on and then having the front strut brace on, be able to tell the difference between the two. But either way, I want to take the car out, you know, take it kind of local to me, just on some little twisties, nothing super crazy. It is in a neighborhood, so I don't want to go too crazy, but just kind of see how it feels. I do have now the ECS tuning front strut brace and the garagistic rear strut brace in the trunk. And so, you know, obviously not as stiff as I can make this car, but it is more stiff than it was, arguably. And I did read before installing the ECS tuning front strut brace that because it hinges in the two areas on the driver's and passenger side up by the front strut tower, that kind of defeats the purpose. But I tightened them snug like it says online, and you know, it didn't feel like it was going anywhere, so I'd be hard pressed to believe that it wasn't any more stiff than without having it on there. But nonetheless, let me do a little bit of driving and then I'll get back to you guys, so please hold. Lost something there. Oh, lost something else. Dude, I don't know for sure, like I was telling you guys, but dude, it feels pretty planted. It feels nice. It feels like it wants to go right where I'm putting it. There are quite a few things that I'd like to eventually get to on this car. I don't think this first like round of parts that I'm doing to initially get it ready for the track, I don't think it'll make it to this round, but eventually I'd like to get a tighter steering rack. I know some people do the, I believe it's the yellow tag E36 ZHP steering rack. That would be a cool little upgrade, kind of tighten up the steering a little bit. I would like to get a smaller steering wheel. I do have a OEM 3-spoke steering wheel, but it needs to be rewrapped. It currently doesn't have any leather on it, and so I don't really want to run it like that. Not only that, but I've heard you need a different clock spring because those came in the later model E36s, and mine is the last year, like the cutoff year that it had the 4-spoke steering wheel. So, but anyways, that would improve steering feel a little bit. Not only that, but I do have a number of stiffer bushings, monoball bushings, all sorts of other stuff to go underneath the car. Obviously the KW Club Sport suspension, if you guys didn't see that video or the last video, I have KW Club Sports going on this car as soon as the parts from KW come in. And yeah, all of that to say that the car feels good right now. It feels really planted. It feels really fun. It feels dialed, you know, but that's just my inexperienced viewpoint, I guess you could say. But it feels good to me, but the car has a long ways to go before it's actually dialed. If I think this feels good, I'm really, really excited to see what all of the parts are gonna feel like once everything is actually installed on the car. And when I'm out on some actual roads that are designed for this kind of driving, like I said, and probably like you guys can see in like the background right now, but I am driving through some neighborhoods, and so I can't really go too crazy, but nonetheless, feels good. And I'm stoked to check off another thing on the list as far as things go for getting this car ready for the track. So yeah, if you guys made it this far in the video, I do appreciate you guys checking it out as usual. Please consider subscribing. Like I said, this car is destined for the track very, very soon, and I'm sure you guys don't want to miss it. I have a ton of fun parts. If any of you guys are interested in maybe a dedicated video on what I have planned and what I have left to go on the car, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep rolling these videos out as I have time to install those parts. And yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of this. I picked up a new little camera. If you guys can't tell or couldn't tell how this thing is kind of tracking me where I go here, I finally bit the bullet and bought the, you know, the car creator camera of the year, you could say. I got the Osmo Pocket 3, and that's what we have going up right here. I finally got the little mic, so hopefully none of this audio sounds too crazy, but yeah. Now I'm just rambling. If you guys enjoyed it, please let me know, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.